After you've been hurt, something fundamental shifts if you allow it to. Your silence becomes your leverage. Your stillness becomes your stance. And if they ever want your softness again, they will have to earn it. Not with words, not with promises, but with sustained, proven change. This is not about becoming bitter. It's about refusing to hand your peace over as an open invitation to be disturbed again. There is a power in silence that most people never learn to use. When you've been disrespected or betrayed, the impulse is to react, speak, explain, defend, or even retaliate. That impulse is the first thing to master. Because in power dynamics, the one who reacts first often loses control of the frame. Stillness doesn't mean passivity. It means you are refusing to be pulled into someone else's emotional timing. Your stillness is not weakness, it's strategy. In psychological terms, it's called stimulus control. You're taking back the right to decide when and how you engage. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. Power belongs to the one who controls the rhythm of the interaction. By holding your position and refusing to be rushed, you force the other side to reveal more than they intended, to show their next move without you showing yours. But to hold this stance, you have to define what you tolerate and make it non-negotiable. Most people have boundaries that shift depending on who's asking, how long they've known them, or how tired they are that day. That's not compassion. That's instability. It's emotional currency inflation, and it destroys your worth over time. Here's where the shift becomes real. You start operating with black and white rules. Not vague lines that can be talked around, but clear standards you enforce every time. I don't respond to yelling. Once I set space, it stays until I reopen it. I don't reward apologies without changed behavior, and you follow through every time without exception. Because people don't test what's enforced, they test what's flexible. Think of a military commander. They don't announce their boundaries in casual conversation. They define their rules of engagement and train everyone under their command to understand them. They know that if they bend once, every future interaction becomes a negotiation. The same applies here. If your boundary is open to debate every time it's challenged, you don't have a boundary, you have a suggestion. This is why, historically, leaders who were feared for their consistency often needed to punish less. Machiavelli wrote that the prince should not be quick to punish, but when he did, it should be decisive, surgical, cold, and final. Why? Because predictability in enforcement removes the need for constant confrontation. People stop testing you when they know exactly what will happen if they do. The truth is, silence after hurt isn't retreat, it's recalibration. It's the space where you shift from, "Why did they do this to me?" to, "What does this teach me about them?" It's the moment you stop letting your emotions set the terms of engagement and start letting your strategy do it. This is the first transformation, turning hurt into a signal to upgrade your position. The wound becomes the warning, the silence becomes the statement, and the stillness becomes the place you plan your next move. This is how the game changes, not with louder words but with stronger terms. Rule number 4 is simple in theory but rare in practice. Define what you tolerate and never wobble. Most people think they have boundaries, but what they actually have are preferences. Lines that shift depending on mood, connection, or pressure. They believe they're being flexible or empathetic, but in reality they're training others to treat their limits as negotiable. And when your limits are negotiable, your worth depreciates like unstable currency. This is emotional currency inflation. Every time you make an exception for bad behavior because they're stressed or it's been a long friendship, you dilute the value of your standards. You teach people that the rules you set are just guidelines, bendable under the right emotional pressure. Eventually, they stop respecting your boundaries altogether because you've shown them those boundaries aren't really boundaries. They're temporary suggestions. The cold-blooded approach removes this ambiguity. You need black and white rules, not I'll tolerate this sometimes if I feel like it, but this is never acceptable under any condition. For example, I don't respond to yelling. Once I set space, it stays until I choose to reopen it. I don't reward apologies unless they're followed by measurable, consistent change. These rules are not up for debate, and they apply equally to everyone: friends, partners, family, colleagues. When you hold your standards without exception, you change the game. You stop teaching people to see how far they can push you and instead teach them that testing you is a waste of their energy. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He wrote that a ruler should punish rarely, but when they do, it must be decisive and final. Not in the sense of cruelty, but in the sense of clarity. When consequences are predictable, they are respected. When they're unpredictable, they're challenged. Think of a chess player who always plays their first moves with precision. Opponents quickly learn that their opening cannot be manipulated. The predictability becomes part of the player's strength. It forces the other side to adapt rather than endlessly testing for weakness. Your boundaries should work the same way. If people know that crossing them will always result in the same outcome, distance, reduced access, withdrawal of privileges, they stop gambling with your forgiveness. Many people believe consistency is cold or unfeeling, but the opposite is true. Consistency is kindness to yourself. It's the act of protecting your mental and emotional stability from the chaos of other people's moods, excuses, and demands. It is the discipline of not renegotiating your values every time someone applies pressure. The reality is, if you don't define your boundaries, someone else will define them for you. And they will always define them in ways that benefit them, not you. In relationships, at work, in friendships, your unspoken limits will be stretched until they break. The solution is not to become guarded against everyone, but to make the terms of access to you crystal clear. This also means being willing to lose people who refuse to meet your standard. This is the part where most people fail. They set a line, but when someone important to them crosses it, they fold. Afraid of being alone, afraid of confrontation, afraid of seeming too harsh. What they don't realize is that keeping people who continuously violate your standards is not loyalty, it's self-abandonment. Cold-blooded discipline is not about cutting people out at the first mistake. It's about ensuring that the privilege of your time, trust, and energy is not given to those who repeatedly show they can't handle it. Your boundaries are the filter through which relationships must pass. And if someone doesn't make it through, it's not your loss. It's their lack of qualification. Once you set your boundaries and enforce them without exception, something remarkable happens. People adjust. They either rise to meet your standard or quietly remove themselves. And both outcomes protect your peace. That's the point. Not to control others, but to create an environment where you no longer need to defend yourself daily. This is the foundation. Without locked boundaries, every other rule is built on sand. And Machiavelli would tell you the same. A fortress is only as strong as its walls. Yours must be unshakable. This is where most people fold. They sense the disrespect. They feel the drain on their peace. They know deep down that they're being used or taken for granted. And yet, the moment they enforce a boundary, the guilt creeps in. They've been conditioned to believe that holding firm is cruelty. Society whispers in their ear, if you're not endlessly patient, you're cold. If you don't explain yourself, you're arrogant. If you don't let them back in, you're unforgiving. That conditioning is the trap. It trains you to value perception over reality, to protect how others see you instead of protecting the truth of your position. And here's the hard truth. The moment you start fearing being called harsh, you hand over control of your actions to the very people you need to keep in check. Machiavelli never feared being called harsh. He feared being called easy. Because in power dynamics, easy is an open invitation to be exploited. Once you are labeled as endlessly tolerant, as someone who will always bend, the testing never stops. Those who want to maintain influence understand that reputation matters, but not in the way most people think. It's not about being liked. It's about being respected, even by those who dislike you. Let them call you cold. Let them rewrite your character in ways that fit their pain. Their labels are not reality. They are just their attempt to rationalize losing access to the version of you they could manipulate. When you fear losing the approval of others, you give them silent veto power over your evolution. And evolution requires the willingness to be misunderstood. You are not being cold. You are being uncompromising. And uncompromising is a necessary trait in any leader, whether of a kingdom or of your own life. Love without boundaries becomes sacrifice. Sacrifice without recognition becomes slavery. And slavery, even the emotional kind, is not noble, it's self-erasure. Machiavelli would never die on someone else's emotional battlefield. He would not stay to defend his worth to those who had already decided to undervalue it. He would observe from a distance, withdraw his presence, and return only when the terms were respected. That is not heartlessness, it's control. Many people hesitate here because they fear losing themselves in the process. I don't want to go numb. I don't want to turn into someone who doesn't care. What if I go cold and never come back? This fear is understandable, but it comes from a misunderstanding. Cold-blooded thinking is not emotional disconnection, it's emotional discipline. Machiavelli didn't lose his humanity. He mastered when and how to use it. Feeling everything all the time is not a virtue, it's a liability. If you feel everything without filter, you become controlled by everything. Cold-blooded thinking means you still love, still care, still connect, but you decide when and for whom. You decide when the heat turns on and you decide when it stays off. That is not absence, it's intelligence. The key shift is this. Stop fearing the stories people will tell about you when you enforce your boundaries. Those stories will always be written to serve them, and perception without reality changes nothing. You can lose 100 opinions and still keep your power. But if you trade reality for reputation, you will lose both. This is the turning point. Choosing control over consensus, reality over reputation, strategy over guilt. Once you make that choice, you stop folding under the weight of being misunderstood and start building a life that cannot be negotiated away. Cold-blooded. The word alone makes people flinch. They picture someone icy, unfeeling, distant from all human warmth. But that's a shallow reading, one that confuses emotional discipline with emotional absence. The truth is, cold-blooded thinking is not the rejection of feeling, it's the mastery of it. In a world that constantly pushes you to react, every insult, every betrayal, every moment of disrespect, those who can control their internal state hold the real advantage. Emotional disconnection says, I don't care at all. Cold-blooded thinking says, I care, but I choose how and when to act on it. It's the difference between being a prisoner of your feelings and being the architect of your responses. Machiavelli understood this distinction. In The Prince, he emphasized that a leader must know when to be merciful and when to be ruthless, not by whim, but by calculation. You cannot maintain your position if you are at the mercy of your emotions. Feeling everything in real time without a filter means you are giving the outside world full access to your steering wheel. And when others can steer your reactions, they can steer your outcomes. This is why the most dangerous people are not those who feel nothing. They are the ones who feel deeply but don't let those feelings dictate their moves. Neuroscience backs this up. The amygdala in your brain is the seat of quick emotional reaction. The prefrontal cortex is the seat of strategic thinking. Cold-blooded thinking is about ensuring the prefrontal cortex has the final say. When you operate this way, you stop reacting to emotional bait. Someone disrespects you. You don't lash out, you calculate. Someone lies to you. You don't spiral, you observe. Someone withdraws suddenly. You don't chase, you interpret. Each of these moments becomes a data point, not a detonator. And here's the part most people miss. You can still love, still be generous, still offer kindness while being cold-blooded. The difference is that your kindness is no longer impulsive. It's intentional. You offer it to people who have proven they can hold it, not to anyone who simply demands it. Cold-blooded thinking also keeps you from becoming someone else's pawn. Emotional players in the power game will always try to provoke you because if they can get you to act from emotion, they can predict you. Predictability is weakness. Cold-blooded thinking breaks that cycle. You become slower to show your cards, harder to read, more difficult to manipulate. The greatest leaders, negotiators, and strategists share this trait. They can be warm and open in one moment, then entirely still and reserved in the next. Not because they've switched personalities, but because they've decided which version of themselves serves the situation. It's the selective use of warmth, not its elimination, that gives them edge. You are not less human for thinking this way. In fact, you are more human because you're reclaiming the very thing that separates human beings from animals. The ability to pause, to think, to choose your actions rather than be driven purely by instinct. Cold-blooded thinking is self-respect in action. It says, my feelings are mine to process privately, and my actions are mine to decide strategically. So stop equating emotional discipline with cruelty. Cruelty wounds for pleasure. Discipline protects for purpose. Cold-blooded thinking doesn't make you empty. It makes you dangerous to those who survive by exploiting your reactions. This is the true meaning of control. Not that you feel less, but that you control when your feelings become visible, and to whom. And that control will do more for your position, your peace, and your longevity than any outburst ever could. Do you know what truly unsettles people? It's not anger. It's not shouting. It's not even revenge. What scares them most is the person who sees betrayal, disrespect, or manipulation and says nothing. No flinch. No outburst, no immediate move, just a quiet, unbroken stillness that tells them, I've seen everything I need to see. The reason this works is simple. People expect patterns. They expect you to react quickly when hurt or challenged. Quick reactions are predictable. Predictable people can be manipulated. But when you refuse to give that instant feedback, when you delay your response, you remove their ability to script your behavior. You create an unfamiliar space where they don't know what will happen next, and that uncertainty becomes your leverage. Machiavelli understood this intimately. He didn't act on impulse, he acted on advantage. He wrote that a ruler must wait for the right moment to act, not when provoked, but when action will produce the most benefit and the least risk. Timing, in his view, was as important as the action itself. Moving too soon is as dangerous as moving too late. The sweet spot is where your move changes the game without giving away your strategy. Slow reactions force you into that sweet spot. They give you time to gather information, to let the other side reveal their hand, to see who rushes to fill the silence with excuses or over-explanations. When you react too fast, you work with incomplete data. When you wait, people often expose themselves far more than they realize. Think of it like chess. A novice player makes their move as soon as they see a possible attack, driven by the thrill of striking first. A master studies the board, waits for the opponent to overextend, and then makes a move that doesn't just win a piece. It shifts the entire game in their favor. That patience is not passivity, it's precision. In the emotional arena, patience does the same. Someone insults you publicly. You could fire back instantly, but that only proves they can get under your skin. Instead, you let the moment breathe. Maybe you respond later in a setting where your words can't be twisted. Or maybe you don't respond at all, letting their behavior define them in the eyes of others. Either way, you've made a choice, not a reflex. Slow reactions also protect you from self-sabotage. Anger and hurt are blinding forces. They push you toward actions that feel satisfying in the moment but cost you long-term influence. When you give yourself the luxury of time, you can turn that same emotional energy into strategy, crafting a response that not only addresses the situation but strengthens your position. This is what I call the strategic pause. It's the moment between stimulus and response where all your power lies. In that pause, you can decide, will I act now, later, or not at all? Will I respond directly, indirectly, or by changing the terrain altogether? That choice, made with full clarity, will always be more powerful than any reaction born from heat. And here's the bonus. Slow reactions make people respect your timing. When you eventually do act, it carries more weight because it's rare. Just as a ruler's decree means more when it's not given lightly, your words and actions will matter more when people know they're measured. So stop thinking that speed equals strength. In the Machiavellian sense, strength is in the restraint, the ability to delay, to watch, to let others overplay their hand. When you master slow reactions, you stop being predictable. And unpredictability is a language of power that everyone understands, even if they can't admit it. Pain is inevitable. Disrespect, disappointment, betrayal. These are not anomalies in life. They are constants. Most people experience them as personal losses, emotional blows that pull them into spirals of self-doubt or anger. But the cold-blooded strategist sees them differently. Pain is not the end of the story. It's the raw material for positioning. When you develop a strategic pain mindset, you stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what did this just teach me about them and about my position? The difference seems small, but it changes everything. In the first question, you're the victim of events. In the second, you're the observer, gathering intelligence. Machiavelli would say that every betrayal, every slight, every exclusion is a report on who you can trust, how others operate, and where the weaknesses in your alliances lie. This shift transforms the way you interpret negative experiences. Someone disrespects you. Instead of reacting, you catalog it. You note the timing, the context, the pattern. Someone disappoints you? Instead of taking it as a reflection of your worth, you file it as a reflection of their reliability. Someone replaces you. Instead of begging to regain the spot, you measure what that tells you about the value they placed on you to begin with. In psychology, this is called cognitive reframing, the process of changing the lens through which you see an event without denying the event itself. The pain is real, but so is the power you can gain from it if you frame it correctly. For the cold-blooded mind, every emotional wound is also a piece of data, and data is currency in any power dynamic. The second part of this mindset is understanding that distance can be power. Most people think distance equals weakness, like you've been pushed out or excluded. In reality, distance often increases value. When you step back, you reduce the supply of your presence. You become less accessible, and in doing so, you force others to reevaluate the terms on which they can interact with you. Machiavelli would withdraw from the court when the atmosphere turned hostile, not because he feared conflict, but because absence sharpened his presence for when he returned. Loss, too, takes on a new meaning. The reactive mind sees loss as a whole. The strategic mind sees loss as evolution, removing pieces from your life that no longer fit the structure you're building. This doesn't mean the process is painless. It means the pain is purposeful. Every exit creates space for better alignment, stronger alliances, and more secure positions. This mindset requires practice. You can start with a simple discipline. The next time you feel slighted, don't react immediately. Instead, document it, mentally or literally. Note the details. Look for patterns over time. This catalog becomes a private intelligence archive, a map of who is safe to trust and who is not. Over time, you'll notice that your emotions become less of a trigger and more of a signal. The real danger of emotional reactivity is that it lets others control your interpretation of reality. If someone can make you see the world through the lens of their offense or betrayal, they've already taken the upper hand. But if you absorb quietly, if you process on your own terms, you become the one person they don't want to cross twice. Not because you're vindictive, but because you're calculating. The strategic pain mindset doesn't erase your humanity. It refines it. It channels your emotional energy into clarity, your clarity into distance, and your distance into power. And once you master it, you stop being at the mercy of what happens to you and start becoming the architect of how you use it. Your warmth is not infinite. It is not a public utility freely available to anyone who asks. It is a resource, one of the most valuable you possess, and like all valuable resources, it must be protected, managed, and given only where it will be respected. This is why you must build a gate. A gate is not a wall. A wall shuts everyone out. A gate decides who comes in. The difference is critical. A wall is fear-driven. A gate is standard-driven. And behind that gate is the truth that your warmth must be earned, not assumed. The world will try to convince you that unconditional access is noble, that the highest form of love is to be endlessly available. But in reality, unconditional giving to those who haven't proven themselves is not virtue. It's vulnerability without protection. When you give warmth without qualification, you create no incentive for people to value it. Scarcity drives respect. Think about how people treat water when it's scarce versus when it's overflowing. One is conserved carefully, the other is wasted without thought. Your emotional energy is no different. The more you hand it out indiscriminately, the less weight it carries. This is why Machiavelli, and every strategist worth their title, treated access as a privilege, not a default. In The Prince, alliances were not built by giving everything up front, but by measuring loyalty over time, rewarding consistency, and withdrawing benefits when loyalty broke. The principle applies just as much to your personal life as it does to politics. Emotional access should be conditional on proof of character. This doesn't mean you stop being kind. It means your kindness becomes selective. You observe before you give. You test for consistency. You note how people act when they have nothing to gain from you. The ones who remain respectful, loyal, and aligned in those moments are the ones who earn more. The rest are kept outside the gate, not out of cruelty, but out of wisdom. Conditional warmth protects both you and your relationships. When people know that your trust and affection are tied to their actions, not their words, they step into accountability. They understand that access to you is not a birthright. It is an agreement that must be maintained, and when they violate that agreement, you don't rage or plead. You close the gate. Closing the gate is not punishment. It's policy. You are making a strategic decision about resource allocation. Just as a kingdom would not keep funding a region that repeatedly betrays it, you should not keep investing emotional energy in those who repeatedly misuse it. The danger is not in being selective. The danger is in being careless. Careless giving leads to emotional exhaustion, resentment, and in time a hardened cynicism that walls off even the deserving. Selective giving, on the other hand, preserves your capacity to give deeply to those who have earned it. So let people prove themselves. Make them pass the checkpoints. Respect, consistency, loyalty, reciprocity, before you open the gate fully. And remember, the gate works both ways. Sometimes you'll need to close it again, not because someone is irredeemable, but because they need to be reminded that access can be lost. This is not selfishness, this is self-command. It's the recognition that your warmth, your care, and your trust are not infinite commodities. They are high-value assets. And in the Machiavellian sense, every asset must be managed with discipline. When your warmth is gated, it becomes more powerful. And the people who stand inside that gate will know they are there because they earned it, and they will treat it with the respect it deserves. If you want to step into true power, you must pay a price most people are unwilling to pay. You must accept being misunderstood. This is where even the strongest waver. They want to be strategic, but they also want to be liked. They want to be respected, but they also want to stay nice. They want to evolve, but only if everyone applauds the change. That's not evolution, that's performance. Machiavelli would tell you that if you need others to agree with your evolution, you have already surrendered the freedom to evolve. Transformation is not a group decision. You will be called cold. You will be labeled detached. You will lose people who loved the version of you that bled on command, that over-explained, that gave without question. And when that happens, you must let them leave without chasing. Their discomfort is not your problem. It's not evidence you've become cruel. It's evidence they've lost access to a version of you that was easier to hurt. People will always mourn the loss of the unprotected version of you because that version cost them nothing to access. When you set standards and hold them, you change the cost of entry, and not everyone can or will pay it. This is the moment most people retreat. They tighten their boundaries for a while, but when the accusations come, you've changed, you're selfish, you're too harsh now. They start loosening them again to keep the peace, but the peace they're keeping is not real peace. It's a performance designed to make other people comfortable while erasing themselves. To hold power, you must stop trying to control the narrative others tell about you. You cannot. Their version of you will always be filtered through their emotions, their needs, their fears. If they want you to be the endlessly giving, endlessly available version of yourself, any move toward self-protection will be framed as an attack. That is their lens, not your reality. Here is the truth. Cold-blooded does not mean heartless. Detached does not mean disconnected. Strong does not mean selfish. These are the labels people use when they lose the ability to exploit your old softness. They are attempts to reframe your strength as a flaw so that you will feel pressured to give it up. The choice before you is simple but not easy. Either you stay soft enough to be safe for everyone else and keep being used, or you accept that your boundaries will offend those who benefited from your lack of them. The first option costs you your peace. The second costs you certain relationships. Only one is sustainable. Machiavelli walked the middle path, the path of strategic empathy. He did not become stone, he became a mirror. He reflected others clearly, offering warmth only when earned, and withdrawing when that warmth was misused. That's the balance you're after. When you accept misunderstanding as part of the cost, you step out of emotional servitude. You no longer shrink yourself to fit the frame others have built for you. And while some will leave, the ones who remain will be the ones who value you for who you are now, not who you had to be to survive. The power without humanity turns into tyranny. Humanity without control turns into self-destruction. The balance between the two is what I call strategic empathy. The ability to care, to connect, to understand, without surrendering your position or your boundaries. Most people believe empathy must be unconditional, that to truly care you have to remove all filters and give yourself without restraint. But Machiavelli understood, and life will prove, that unconditional empathy in a ruthless world is a liability. True power lies in being able to extend empathy while maintaining the structures that keep you safe. You can reach out a hand without stepping off solid ground. Strategic empathy starts with clarity of intention. When you offer kindness, ask yourself, am I doing this to protect my values or to avoid conflict? Am I giving because it's aligned or because I fear being seen as unkind? If the answer leans toward fear, guilt, or image maintenance, it's not empathy, it's manipulation of yourself for someone else's comfort. This doesn't mean you become transactional in a cold, lifeless way. It means you choose where your emotional investment goes. You still give second chances, but you attach them to proof of change. You still listen, but you know when to step away if the same patterns repeat. You still forgive, but you don't forget the terms that protect you from a repeat offense. Think of a general in the middle of a war who spares a defeated city, not because he is naive, but because mercy in that moment strengthens his long-term position. That is strategic empathy, action guided by both compassion and calculation. You're not being cold, you're being precise. This is also how you avoid becoming the monster they accuse you of being once you start enforcing boundaries. When you can show care without collapsing your standards, you demonstrate that your boundaries are not about cruelty. They're about sustainability. People might still resist them, but over time, the consistent pairing of empathy with structure builds a reputation of fairness. And fairness, even in a ruthless environment, commands respect. The danger is in swinging too far in either direction. If you abandon empathy completely, you lose the ability to form alliances and inspire loyalty. If you drown in empathy without structure, you become overextended, resentful, and eventually ineffective. Strategic empathy is the middle path. It protects your capacity to care by preventing that care from being drained dry. In practice, this means controlling both your presence and your absence. Sometimes showing up is the most powerful move. Other times, absence sends the clearer message. Strategic empathy is knowing which will serve you best in the moment. Machiavelli himself often withdrew from political centers when his presence would be disadvantageous, not because he stopped caring about his cause, but because he understood that his position mattered more than constant participation. When you master strategic empathy, you stay human without being fragile. You remain capable of connection without being consumed. You keep your heart open, but only to those who have proven they won't use it as a weapon. And in doing so, you become the rare kind of leader, of yourself and of others, who can both command respect and inspire loyalty without losing control of either. Stepping into control doesn't mean becoming rigid stone, nor does it mean letting your guard drop in the name of being real. It means building a system, clear, repeatable steps that protect your position while keeping your humanity intact. Machiavelli didn't rely on random bursts of strength. He relied on structure. And in your own life, that structure comes down to 6 core steps. Step 1. Define your intention, not their perception. Before you set a boundary, ask yourself why. Is it to protect your well-being or to punish someone? Are you creating distance because you're drained, or because you want to manipulate a reaction? Are you silent because you've already spoken enough, or because you're playing passive-aggressive games? If your answer is rooted in self-protection and clarity, not retaliation, you're on the right path. Machiavelli didn't care about looking noble. He cared about maintaining position, and position held without cruelty is rare and respected. Step 2. Show mercy without losing your stance. There is nothing weak about giving a second chance. Mercy, when deserved, can strengthen a relationship and inspire loyalty. The danger lies in forgetting why you created distance in the first place. When you offer mercy, you do it without erasing the consequence. You don't pretend the violation never happened. You return with terms intact. This ensures that your kindness is not mistaken for weakness. Step 3. Control your presence, not just your distance. Many think pulling away is the main tool of power, but presence, when deployed strategically, is even stronger. Show up briefly, speak with clarity, and exit before familiarity dulls your influence. Be remembered for your precision, not for overstaying your moment. In courtly politics and modern life alike, those who leave while they're still respected maintain an aura of authority. Step 4. Maintain standards, not control. You can't force people to respect you. What you can do is make disrespect expensive. That means you don't demand apologies, you withdraw access. You don't beg for communication, you remove emotional privileges. Silence becomes your currency. If they rise to meet your standard, they earn their way back in. If not, They were never meant to stand beside your evolution. Step 5. Let kindness become selective, not exhausted. You don't stop being kind. You stop being careless with your kindness. Give slowly, after observation. Build internal checkpoints. Keep exit strategies ready if the situation goes off track. And if someone calls that transactional, let them. Unconditional giving sounds noble until it's used against your peace. From a strategic view, selective kindness is not selfish. It's sustainable. Step 6. Don't defend your boundaries, enforce them. When someone calls you cold, distant, or says you've changed, you don't launch into explanations. Power is not proved in conversation. It's revealed in consistency. You keep walking. You don't reopen what you've closed without proof of change. And if they miss the old version of you, let them. That version was easier to hurt. These 6 steps are not tricks. They're a way of life. When practiced consistently, they form a self-reinforcing loop. Clarity fuels consistency. Consistency builds respect. Respect protects your position. This is why you can hold power without losing yourself. Because you've built a structure where your humanity is preserved by your discipline, not eroded by your lack of it. Machiavelli would remind you the strongest fortress is not made of stone. It's made of rules you refuse to break. These 6 steps are that fortress. Build it once, live in it always. Principles give you direction. Steps give you a framework. But it's your daily habits that make them permanent. Machiavelli didn't theorize power and leave it on paper. He embodied it through repeated actions until they became instinct. If you want your boundaries and strategy to hold under pressure, you must ingrain them into muscle memory. These 5 habits are the anchor. Habit 1. Move without emotional announcements. You don't broadcast your decisions. You don't post a manifesto about cutting people off or focusing on yourself. You simply move. Your replies slow. You stop over-explaining. You don't re-engage once you've withdrawn. Real boundaries are written in your consistency, not in captions or speeches. Machiavelli didn't seek consensus for his silence. He simply made sure his silence was felt. Habit 2. Stay polite, never over-familiar. Warmth should not be automatic. It should be earned and maintained. You greet with composure, compliment with purpose, and exit while still respected. Over-familiarity makes you predictable and easy to manipulate. Politeness keeps your image disciplined and clean, ensuring that even those who dislike you cannot openly discredit you without looking unreasonable. In strategy, civility is armor. It deflects unnecessary conflict while keeping you in control. Habit 3. Reflect before reacting. Someone disappoints you. You don't snap, you observe. Someone crosses your line. You don't escalate, you record. Cold-blooded doesn't mean you have no emotion. It means you never let emotion move before thought. This pause, this internal filter is your edge. When others spiral, shout, or sulk, your stillness will intimidate them more than any outburst could. Deliberation is a weapon. Silence is the sheath that protects it until you're ready to draw. Habit 4. Never reopen what you closed without requalification. If you ended a friendship, relationship, or partnership, you left for a reason. Don't return without a new one. Too many go back because it's been a while or they apologized. Time does not heal betrayal. Standards do. Unless they've shown genuine growth and change, there is nothing to miss. Without requalification, reopening the door invites the same problem in with a new date stamp. Habit 5. Treat your peace as a private strategy, not a public statement. Your emotional maturity is not marketing material. You're not cold-blooded so people admire you. You're cold-blooded so people respect what they cannot access at will. Live quietly. Protect deeply. Let the results of your self-control speak louder than any quote or video could. Those who need to know will notice. Those who don't matter. When these habits become reflex, you stop thinking of boundaries as an act. They become your nature. You no longer have to tell people how you operate. Your patterns make it clear. And the more predictable your enforcement, the less often you'll have to enforce anything at all. People will self-regulate because they understand the cost of crossing you. This is the Machiavellian finish line, a position so stable that your power is maintained without constant confrontation. A position where you don't need to prove yourself in every interaction, because your habits have already done it for you. We've moved from principles to practices, from mindset shifts to daily habits. Now we arrive at the finish line. Not the end of the journey, but the state you maintain when the work has been done long enough to become who you are. This is the Machiavellian state of power, total control without the need for constant explanation. By now, your silence is no longer just a pause, it's a signal. Your boundaries no longer require speeches, they are enforced by the pattern of your behavior. You no longer debate your worth with anyone, it's evident in the way you live. This is where the cold-blooded mind finds peace, when discipline becomes instinct, and instinct becomes identity. At this level, you don't move to prove a point, you move to preserve your position. You don't seek permission to evolve, you evolve because it's necessary. You no longer fear losing relationships that can't survive your standards, because you understand that keeping them would cost you something far more valuable, your self-command. This is also where you begin to understand the deeper paradox of power. The less you announce, the more it is felt. The less you defend your boundaries, the stronger they stand. The less you need to be seen as powerful, the more others adjust to your presence. Machiavelli knew this centuries ago. True authority doesn't shout, it shapes the room quietly, invisibly, until the terms are set without ever being spoken. You've also learned by now that maintaining power is not about staying in constant defense. It's about creating an environment where challenges are rare because the cost of testing you is clear. You've built the fortress, not of stone, but of rules, standards, and habits that don't bend under pressure. And with that comes another truth. You no longer measure yourself by how quickly you react to attacks or how loudly you win an argument. You measure yourself by how rarely you need to enter the battlefield at all. In the most strategic sense, the best victories are the ones that never require a fight. This is the life of total power without explanation. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop caring about being understood by everyone. It doesn't mean you stop giving. It means you give where it is earned, where it will be valued, where it will not be weaponized against you. It doesn't mean you've built walls so high no one can reach you. It means you've built gates, and you hold the keys. From this point on, your presence, your absence, your warmth, your silence, each becomes a calculated instrument. You no longer chase peace. You are peace, and that makes you impossible to unseat. Machiavelli would have called this the ultimate advantage, to live in such a way that your position sustains itself and your power is not borrowed from the approval of others. You have rules, you have rituals, you have repetition, and now you have permanence. Total power, no explanation.